Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 DocLands Documentary Film Festival. I'm Ken Jacobson from the programming team, and I'm here with director Zara Katz and Lisa Riordan Seville to talk about their terrific film, A Woman on the Outside. Zara Katz is an independent filmmaker and photo producer for editorial, documentary, and branded content, specializing in crafting character-driven visual stories. Zara has worked with outlets including the New York Times Lens blog, Time Magazine, Oxford American, Pop-Up Magazine, and Lifetime A&E networks. She is currently photography director at NBC News. Lisa Riordan Seville is an award-winning independent investigative reporter and producer. Her stories, which focus on how policy shapes people's daily lives, have appeared on NBC News, Lifetime A&E networks, BuzzFeed News, The Guardian US, WNYC Radio, and The Nation magazine. A Woman on the Outside is Zara and Lisa's feature documentary debut. The film had its world premiere at the 2022 South by Southwest Film Festival, and we're absolutely thrilled to be screening it here at DocLands. Zara and Lisa, welcome to DocLands.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I understand when you initially came to this topic, it wasn't to make a documentary. Can you talk about what first drew you to this topic and how it evolved into the documentary that we just saw?
Zara and I have known each other a long time, and back in about 2013, I had been reporting on criminal justice issues for some time, and Zara sort of commented that she got so much of her news through photographs, but there wasn't that much photography around incarceration at the time, and it was a different moment in news. And so we got together and started an Instagram feed called Everyday Incarceration. Zara reached out to her network, and we started curating photography from about 40 years of mass incarceration to try and give a visual picture of what that looked like. And one story that was really missing was that of a lot of my sources, which were women who had loved ones who were incarcerated. You can't call someone who's inside on the phone. You have to wait for them to call you. So very often the women were my conduits when I was reporting. But we talked a lot about their experience, but it didn't make it into the story. And so we decided we wanted to focus on that for a project for the Instagram feed. We started talking to women around the country. Kristal at the time had a very robust Instagram feed for her van service. And we connected that way through a photographer named Jacoby Adam, who had worked on this issue. And we went to a cookout and met Kristal. And from day one, she said, you got to meet this woman, you got to meet this woman. We ended up doing a multimedia photography project with her and her riders. And we had a little exhibition video in there, Dawn to Dusk. And we thought that that would be it. And then we blame each other. We don't know which one of us had the idea to keep going. But 6 years later, that first shoot that was at the exhibition video became the opening to the film. And we turned that into a documentary. So it really evolved over time as it moved from about the van service really to Kristal's experience more narrowly.
So definitely going to get into Kristal's story and talk about her. She's amazing. But just briefly, how did the two of you come to collaborate creatively? How did this team get together?
Well, I guess we have to give a shout out to CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, where we both got our master's degree a few years apart, and to our California family and friends who connected us, multiple different friends, and having these conversations about how issues around prison were being represented visually. And how we could start collaborating in that way to come from Lisa's expertise on reporting on prisons and prison issues, and then my network of photographers and visual producers, and how could we start looking at the issue of mass incarceration in America through visual stories. So the Instagram feed, which, you know, is still in existence and is kind of a living archive, you know, we add to it when we can, is a collaboration with every photographer who's on there, who has contributed their images. And those narratives have come through the feed in this way of, you know, looking at the ripple effect of mass incarceration. Yes, there are stories and photographers who have gained access to prisons and, you know, behind prison walls, but equally as important are the stories of reentry and are the stories of families and of children. And really that is what we were seeing, is that this narrative was very much missing of the experience of women who were so often picking up the pieces and keeping their families together and trying to keep themselves together. And I think both Lisa and I have a real commitment to doing stories and working on stories around women and the female experience. And so that's how we then just kept moving forward in working on this documentary.
So one of the things that's really fascinating about the film is to observe the scene inside the Bridging the Gap van, when Kristal is driving folks, her clients really, to see their loved ones at the prison. Can you describe what it was like for you to be riding along with them for hours at a time? And was there anything that stood out to you in particular on those rides?
You know, it's very intimate, closed space. And I think it speaks to Kristal's relationship with people that, you know, we could pull up at their house at 5 o'clock in the morning and she'd be like, the journalists are here. And they just kind of rolled with it. You know, we shot it, I was often in the back and Zara was in the front. And a couple of things stood out to me. There's a rhythm to it, and Kristal will describe it really well, you know, kind of tired in the morning. Then people sometimes get comfortable. Sometimes people know each other, sometimes people don't, but they start talking a little bit more and sharing some stories. There's an excitement as people start to get close and they kind of get ready, put on some makeup, you know, a little scent and gather themselves. And then there's a rhythm on the way back. It's often a little melancholy right when they get back in because you've just left your loved one behind. The rides are long. They take, as you see, many hours. But I was struck by the conversations that bubble up over time. You know, people talk about their kids, they talk about work, they talk about sometimes the complexities or the joys of their relationships. And each ride has had its own tenor, but it was really this kind of symphonic or orchestral up and down throughout the course of the ride. And by the end, some people came out friends who might not have known each other before. And that was always Kristal's intention.
Yeah. For me, I think it was really the physicality of it. I mean, you know, we put some time markers in that initial van ride, but to, you know, be very explicit, the van ride started sometime between 4 or 5 when Kristal and her mother would drive around Philadelphia for almost 2 hours, picking up people at their front door. Then they would rendezvous at a gas station. People would shuffle vans, depending on what prisons they were going to. Then it was, you know, a 3-hour drive to the prison. You drop everybody off. Kristal would often just stay in the van and take a nap. The visit's like about 5 hours, give or take. Then everybody loads back in the van. You drive back 3 hours, hoping that there's not horrible traffic getting into Philadelphia. And then you drive around Philadelphia for another 2 or 3 hours, dropping everybody off. And just how long that is. And that doesn't even account for the 5 hours of sitting while you're in a prison visiting room, because that's all you can do is sit and talk to somebody. And many of these women did this every single week. You know, Kristal and her mom were often driving both weekend days, you know, sometimes even 3 days. And the prison that we go to in the film is about 3 hours away. They were going to prisons that were all the way across Pennsylvania, you know, 6 hours away in one day. So that is, you know, really, really physically taxing on your body and then on your mind. And yet Kristal really built such community in the van. You know, the one thing we couldn't get in is the soundtrack that Kristal played. You know, that was really important. And these are, you know, women of many ages, but, you know, just listening to love songs and listening to contemporary music, and how, you know, there was so much joy in singing along, or, you know, I mean, these songs could have been the soundtrack to this whole film and to this experience, and how beautiful that was, to see those friendships and that community built.
One of the things that really stood out to me about Kristal, and one reason why I think she's so remarkable, is how much she code switches in the course of a day, in the course of an hour, or any period of time. And by that, I mean, she's constantly navigating different spaces, whether it's in the van. And in the van, even, it's interesting because many of the women are Muslim women. She is not, but she has a great rapport with them, an easy rapport. She's code switching when she's having to deal with the government and trying to adopt Nyvae, and she herself is a social worker, but she still has to kind of code switch into understanding and communicating effectively with government bureaucracy. She's a sister, she's a daughter, she has all these different relationships with people and organizations, and she's a small business owner. We see her going back to her alma mater to receive an award, and boy, that's a whole different cultural milieu. So can you just talk about, I guess this question is, wow, this is a really remarkable person, isn't she?
She is. Kristal is one of the most curious people I've ever met. You know, we decided to do the film pretty verite, and as you see, we're not present in it really, although you catch a few flashes of us. But there's a couple of early shoots when we were really kind of figuring out what we were doing and not sure where. Kristal's actually interviewing us the whole time. And I think that those conversations behind the scene really grounded the film and grounded the intimacy in the film. But she wants to know about everything. She's not intimidated by very much. She kind of goes straight in. And so she'll walk into a room of people incredibly different than her, or a new experience, and just be really open and curious to it. And I think that enables her to move through those different worlds. But as she will tell you, it's exhausting and it takes a toll too, because you're always evaluating, performing, navigating. And as with many people, her skills are also, her ability to do that, I think it sometimes burned her out. But yet she continues to be, and continues to just always surprise me with her curiosity, I think.
It also seems like that code switching to me is a function of the systemic obstacles that she faces, because she needs to do that in order to really succeed in the world.
Yeah, you know, we've talked about that often, and that is really central to this film and to Kristal's story and to the story of so many people that are touched by the system, of what roles they have to take on. And whether that's code switching or actually role switching, I mean, she she says that, am I the daughter or am I the mother? Am I a sister or am I, the mother of my brother's child? And that it is what the system demands of her, is to be all these different things. And that was, a big part of the conversation and the relationship we built with her, as being women who are just a few years older, who also went to college, who, are really trying to maintain our friendships and our romantic relationships and our family relationships. How do you do that when, you're also asked to be a mother at, age 23, and asked to, take care of your own mother who is suffering from depression? And then how do you take care of yourself? So that is really central to this film and to Kristal's story, and her willingness to kind of share all the nuance of that, and sometimes the really hard, messy parts. I mean, you see her break, and that is something that she wanted to share as well. That toll that it takes, and how you try and keep it all together.
At the Bridging the Gap annual picnic, Kristal says about what it's like when one's loved ones are released from prison. It's easy for them to come home. The hard part is them staying home. In the film, both of Kristal's brothers come home, as well as her father. What were the biggest challenges for the family in terms of them staying home? And obviously each one is a different story, but
yeah, I think if whether you spend a lot of time or you sort of cycle in and out, and she had family members who did both, landing back is complicated. Your work history is often patchy. You see her dad, he spent a lot of time he didn't know how to use a computer, and every application is on a computer. So how you begin to do that. We don't get into every nuance, but in virtually every city, in Philadelphia is no different. Housing is really complicated, and you see Kristal paying her father's rent. And then I think that there's the more nuanced emotional stuff of what it means to come home. And I think for Nyvae, he came home and was trying to figure out what it meant to be an adult he hadn't really worked much before, and then all of a sudden there's also the responsibility of being a father and trying to kind of catch up with what it means to be in your 30s all of a sudden. And then, that puts a really huge strain on the family, because the people who are home are trying to help and shepherd, but the expectations are high of the people coming home, and the expectations are high of the people who remain there, and those tensions grow. So Kristal has often talked about, she wishes there were more healing while people were inside too, and how can we start to build those relationships, but then additionally there need to be better supports structurally, because it really is, you sort of take someone away for 10, 20 years, and then you kind of deposit them back in the family without all of the support that's needed. And I think you see that, and the strain that causes.
let's pull back a minute and take a broader view. Over the course of making the film, and even going back before that, the multimedia project and the Instagram project that you created, what have you learned about the carceral system that you think most critically must be changed? Just a simple question.
Yeah.
No problem.
We have really tried, I think, the whole time to center the voices of the people most affected. And I think that is what needs to most be changed. There is this idea that there's some division between the people who are incarcerated and the community. And in fact, the communities that experience the biggest results of crimes are often the people who also have people inside. And if we actually started to listen to the communities most affected and centered their voices, their thoughts, their opinions, their policy, I really think that would be the greatest. You know, there's not one opinion there, but if those voices and thoughts were centered, that would make the greatest change, rather than there's some idea that that those who are involved in criminal acts and those who suffer from them are somehow different populations, you know. And with Kristal's family, you see both sides of the coin. And I think if we listened there, that would be the greatest source of change.
In terms of centering their voices, you know, the two of you are white women based in New York City. What were some of the challenges for you, for Kristal, her family, and her community in terms of making sure that this film accurately reflected their perspectives and centered their voices?
Yeah, this is a conversation that we have been having from day one. It is something that Lisa and I are aware of and involved in, and, you know, want to be part of shifting a dynamic of how stories are told. So it was a conversation that Lisa and I were constantly having between us. It was a conversation that we were having with Kristal and her entire family, asking, you know, to be where to be and what parts of the story to capture. It was a conversation with Kristal and having her help build the narrative. While she wasn't in the edit room with us, there were, you know, the conversations grew and grew and grew as we were building the film about what to include and to, you know, especially with her VO that we build, with her, you know, thoughts that are in there. That was a really important, you know, transparent conversation we were having with her. Additionally, you know, our producer, Kira C. Jones, came on about 3 years ago and is, you know, a brilliant, experienced director and producer, and a Black woman who has had some experience with this. And it was a very transparent conversation with her as well, of what we include, what we don't include. And so that is how, you know, we wanted to move forward. And this is Kristal's story, and this is the family's story. We did share cuts, some along the way and definitely towards the end. And that was incredibly important, that they felt like their story was authentically told. So that it's incredibly important to us. And it's an issue that continues, of how do you have a collaborative relationship in telling stories about communities that are, and people that you are not part of, that are not your life.
And how did you show the finished film to Kristal and her family? And what was it a private screening, or was it a South by in the premiere? What tell us about their reaction to seeing the finished film.
We showed, Kristal saw several cuts along the way. And then before we picture locked, we went down to Philadelphia and screened it for Kristal Speaks, Big Kristal, and Kristal, Little Kristal, and Victor and Nyvae. And we wanted to screen it before we were picture locked fully, because it has been a dialogue the whole time. And sometimes it's one phrase or one shot or something that really is difficult. One of the reasons we didn't screen it for Kristal Speaks earlier is that it was pretty challenging to watch the first time. You know, there's a lot of difficulty. You see Jarve, you see Jabo, of course, his death, and that was really challenging. And, you know, we just said, is there anything in there that you have a problem with, that feels off, that that you want to change? And everyone said no. And so that was our promise to them, that we would talk about it the whole way through and at the end. But it was really special because at South by, we showed it to them before color and sound was done. And at South by, everyone came, and along with Kristal's friends, and we got to watch it in a theater together. And when it finished, Nyvae, who had seen it a couple weeks before, said, "I feel like I've never even seen that movie before." So, I think we all got to watch it for the first time at South by in its final form, in a theater, and that was a completely different experience for all of us. But like I said, and like Zara described, it was really an iterative process along the way, where we made sure that that people felt, that the family felt like we were representing their story right. And if they didn't, if there was something off, that was a conversation. But I have to say, the family has been willing to share so much with so many people. And we talked about what that would mean, what that would feel like, that it was going out into the world. And I think that's a continuing conversation as it does go out into the world.
Yeah. Another really important element to this collaboration is Kristal's own photos and videos that she was sharing with us, and that she so much was documenting her own life, as a millennial does, but that became really important to include her perspective, and that she was often, calling us when things were happening that were really heavy, big things. And if we were not able to make it, she was filming. That was part of kind of the reciprocity that was going on, is, her kind of learning filming, and that curiosity that Lisa talked about. I mean, that she is an incredible photographer in her own right, and has built that, and filmmaker, and makes like her own videos as well. But that was so important to it, and to the process, and collaborating and sharing.
Yeah, and it really came through in the finished film. Seeing her videos and her photographs really brought you inside her world and elevated the storytelling. Frankly, it was wonderful, and you were very generous in how you used it and incorporated it. And it includes, footage at the end shot in Egypt on that trip that she and Nyvae take. And I would say, the film, basically, with one notable exception, the tragic death of Jabo, does kind of have a happy ending, which is that trip and the adoption that precedes it. But obviously, that's the ending of a film, and people's lives go on. So I wanted to ask you, if you could, to give us an update on Kristal and the family members.
A lot has evolved since then. We decided to end the film before COVID. We were pretty much done shooting, and it just felt like COVID was going to open up a whole set of unknowns. So Kristal's life has altered pretty radically. She is now no longer running the van service. All visits were pretty much have gone virtual. They've been on and off in Pennsylvania, but in a lot of places, there's just after COVID or during COVID, they were mostly closed down. And she's really moved into this new stage in the cannabis industry. She found, I think, the trauma of what happened with her brother, and just the trauma of reuniting the family really threw her for a while. And she found some healing there, and she's become part of a movement to both free people who have been incarcerated for drug crimes, and and particularly marijuana, and then kind of moving into that space. And so that's what she's been doing recently. And it's been really interesting she's taken all that entrepreneurial verve and advocacy, and continues to do a lot of advocacy work. Nyvae is great. He is in high school. He's got a job. He's a really, he's just like you see in the film. He's quiet, and then we'll just spit out these deep thoughts, and that continues to be the case. And Kristal's, everyone's pretty good. Kristal's mom is good. Kristal's dad is, as you see, he gets out at the end of the film and is doing really well. Their relationship is really growing. And
How about Nyvae?
Nyvae is kind of, they're not in touch right now. So, and he's a little more separated from the family at the moment. But overall, they have been through a lot, and the families like continued to really persevere. So yeah, any other updates?
Yeah. Kristal, is just really thriving, as is Nyvae, and as is Big Kristal too. Finding a lot of happiness and trying to figure out how to heal. And I think that's part of where Kristal is too. With her work around cannabis advocacy, that it is also about self-healing too, and especially being very vocal as a Black woman, that she feels like this is really important to her and to her community, to be able to not be stigmatized in, being part of a community and culture and industry. And it's incredible to see her, take that on and really just thrive and succeed. And she's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, maybe someday down the line, if not another documentary, then another project of some kind where we can see what happens with Kristal and Nyvae and the family. But I want to just thank you both so much for being with us today, and congratulate you on this really wonderful film. It's both intimate and sprawling. I think it does an amazing job of giving us an insight into these people and into these issues that are so important. So congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you.
you.
Bye.